Welcome to our deep dive into the teenage brain.
hmm
We're going to be looking at why teens are so brilliant one minute and completely baffling the next.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating area of research, and we'll be diving into the work of Beatrice Luna, a developmental cognitive neuroscientist who's really challenging a lot of the assumptions about this critical stage of development.
Okay, so before we get into Luna's specific findings, can we just sort of level set here? What exactly is executive function? And what does cognitive control have to do with it?
So executive function is essentially that set of mental processes that helps us plan, focus, control our impulses. It's like the air traffic control system of your brain, making sure everything's kind of running smoothly. And cognitive control is one of its key tools. It's what lets you resist that urge to check your phone every 5 seconds and stay focused on, say, this podcast.
Oh yeah, I need a lot of help with that. So instead of just reacting on instinct, we can pause, think things through, and make a deliberate choice.
Exactly. And Luna's research shows just how complex this process is, especially in the teenage brain.
So one of her key findings is that teens' responses in cognitive control tasks are way more variable than adults.
Yeah, much more variable.
Now wait a minute. Isn't the teenage brain supposed to be under construction? Wouldn't that make them less capable of cognitive control, not more variable?
So Luna's work actually pushes back against this idea that the teen brain is simply under construction. She argues that by adolescence, the brain already has all of its basic structures. What's happening now is a process of specialization, of refining, honing those neural pathways based on experience.
So instead of new parts being built, it's more like those existing parts are being fine-tuned, like a musical instrument being calibrated for optimal performance.
That's a great analogy.
Okay, I like that one.
Yeah. So this calibration process helps explain why teens can sometimes seem all over the place in their behavior. They're literally experimenting with different neural pathways, testing the waters, figuring out what works best in different situations.
That makes sense. But it also seems kind of risky. What about all that talk about teen impulsivity and risk-taking?
Right. Well, this is where it gets really interesting. Luna's research has actually uncovered a surprising link between cognitive control and rewards in the teenage brain. So it turns out when there's a potential reward involved, teens can actually ramp up their cognitive control to match or even exceed adult levels.
Hold on, so you're saying that teens can be just as focused and disciplined as adults when they're motivated? That kind of challenges the stereotype of teens as being completely ruled by their impulses.
Yeah, for sure. And Luna's research goes even deeper, showing how this link between rewards and cognitive control plays out in real-world scenarios.
Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me more. What kind of real-world scenarios?
So her team conducted this really interesting study using a simulated driving game. They found that when teens were driving alone, the possibility of earning rewards actually led them to take fewer risks. They were focused on the goal, just like adults would be.
But there's a but coming, isn't there?
There is a but.
Yeah.
When their friends were watching, the teens took way more risks, even though they could still earn rewards for safe driving. Oh, wow. So even though they knew better, the social reward of impressing their friends overrode their cognitive control. It's like the possibility of peer approval totally hijacked their decision-making.
Precisely. And this highlights a really crucial point that Luna emphasizes. The type of reward matters. While tangible rewards, like money, can actually boost cognitive control, social rewards, especially from peers, can sometimes undermine it.
Interesting. So it's not just about having the ability for cognitive control, it's also about understanding how different motivations and contexts can influence how and when that control is applied.
Exactly. And this variability in cognitive control is actually a key feature of the teenage brain, not a flaw. It allows teens to be adaptable, to explore different possibilities, and ultimately to learn and grow from their experiences, both positive and negative.
Okay, this is all so fascinating, but I have to ask, if teens can be so easily influenced by social rewards, how much responsibility can they really have for their actions, especially when it comes to things like risky behavior or even criminal activity? That's a great question, and one that Luna addresses head-on in her research. So she argues that while teens might need support to avoid those impulsive decisions, they are capable of making thoughtful, long-term choices, especially when they're given time to deliberate and have access to stable adult guidance.
So it's not a black and white issue of teens are responsible or teens aren't responsible. It's more nuanced than that.
It is more nuanced than that. And Luna's work on the teenage brain is really helping us to understand those nuances and develop approaches that acknowledge both the incredible potential and the unique vulnerabilities of this stage of development.
This has been a truly eye-opening discussion, and I'm already starting to rethink a lot of my assumptions about the teenage brain. But before we move on, I'd love to hear what stood out to you the most about Luna's research so far.
Well, to me, what's really fascinating is how Luna's work helps us to see this variability in the teenage brain, not as a problem to be fixed, but rather as a crucial part of how teens learn and adapt to the world around them. It's about embracing that exploration and creating environments that support healthy development, even when that development might look messy or unpredictable.
That's a great point. And it makes me even more curious to delve deeper into Luna's work and see how these insights can be applied to real-world situations. We'll be back in the next part of our deep dive to explore just that. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into the fascinating world of the teenage brain. We're picking up right where we left off, exploring the incredible plasticity of the adolescent brain, and how Luna's research is helping us to reframe what we thought we knew about this crucial stage of development.
One of the most exciting aspects of Luna's work is her emphasis on how experiences, especially during adolescence, have a profound impact on shaping neural pathways. And these pathways ultimately influence the adults these teenagers will become.
It's like that saying, neurons that fire together wire together. But Luna's research goes beyond that basic principle, right?
Absolutely. She's not just interested in how the brain changes. She's exploring how those changes manifest in real-world behavior and decision-making. Remember our discussion about cognitive control and how variable it can be in teens?
Yeah, that was a real eye-opener.
Yeah.
Especially that study where teens took more risks when driving with their friends watching, even if it meant missing out on potential rewards.
Exactly. That study perfectly illustrates how social dynamics, especially peer influence, can sometimes overpower even well-developed cognitive control in teens. But here's the thing. Luna argues that pushing for adult-like executive function too early might actually be counterproductive.
Counterproductive? You mean like trying to force teens to be super focused and disciplined all the time could actually backfire?
Precisely. Her research suggests that instead of viewing the variability of the teenage brain as a deficit, we should see it as a valuable feature, a period of exploration that allows teens to try different approaches, test their limits, and ultimately learn from both their successes and failures.
So instead of trying to fit teens into a rigid adult-like mold, we should be encouraging them to explore different possibilities and embrace their unique developmental journey.
Exactly. Think of it like this: adolescence is a time for testing out different neural pathways, figuring out what works best in various situations, and fine-tuning their cognitive toolkit for the challenges and opportunities of adulthood.
It's like they have a mental laboratory where they can experiment and refine their skills without the same consequences they might face as adults.
That's a great way to put it. And this period of exploration is absolutely crucial for developing adaptability and resilience, qualities that are essential for navigating the complexities of adult life.
So instead of freaking out when teens make mistakes or trying to micromanage their every decision, we should be focusing on creating environments where they could explore their potential, test their boundaries, and learn from their missteps without facing harsh judgments or consequences.
Absolutely. It's about providing guidance and support, of course, but also allowing them the space to figure things out for themselves, to make their own choices and learn from the outcomes, even if those outcomes aren't always perfect.
This idea of finding the right balance between structure and freedom is so important. But it also brings us back to that tricky question of responsibility. If teens' brains are still developing, how do we hold them accountable for their actions, especially when it comes to things like risky behavior or even criminal activity?
This is a question that Luna grapples with in her research, and it's one that has huge implications for how we approach things like the juvenile justice system.
Because if teens' brains are wired for exploration and their cognitive control is still developing, can we really hold them to the same standards of responsibility as adults?
That's the debate, isn't it? Luna's research provides some much-needed nuance to this conversation. While acknowledging the limitations of the developing brain, she also emphasizes that teenagers are capable of making thoughtful decisions when given the time and support to do so.
So it's not about letting teens off the hook for their actions, but about recognizing the unique developmental context in which those actions are taking place.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that adolescence is a period of both increased vulnerability and incredible potential. And as Luna points out, even though teens might be more prone to impulsive actions, they can also engage in long-term planning and deliberation, especially when they have access to stable adult guidance and support.
So it's not a simple question of whether teens are responsible or not, but rather about finding ways to support their development while also holding them accountable in ways that are both just and developmentally appropriate.
Precisely. It's about creating systems that acknowledge the nuances of the developing brain and provide opportunities for rehabilitation growth and second chances. It's about recognizing that teens are not simply passive bystanders in their own lives. They have agency and deserve to be treated with respect and dignity even when they make mistakes.
It's like Luna is saying, we need to stop viewing the teenage brain as a problem to be fixed and start appreciating it as a remarkable stage of development with its own unique strengths and challenges.
That's a great way to put it. And by understanding the science behind this transformation, we can better support teenagers as they navigate this often turbulent but ultimately incredibly important period of growth.
I couldn't agree more. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive so far. We've gone beyond those simple explanations about dopamine and synaptic pruning and really delved into the complexities of Luna's research.
And what's so exciting about Luna's work is that it has real-world applications for how we educate, parent, and support teenagers.
That's what I'm most curious about.
Yeah.
How can we take these insights from the lab and translate them into tangible changes in the real world? We'll explore that and more in the final part of our deep dive. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the teenage brain. It's been an incredible journey so far, hasn't it?
It really has. We've gone from understanding the basic mechanics of cognitive control to exploring the profound impact of social dynamics and rewards on teen behavior.
And you know what's been so exciting for me? It's realizing that Luna's research isn't just theoretical. It's offering practical insights that we can actually use to create real-world change in how we approach education, parenting, and even mental health.
Exactly. Luna's work is all about bridging that gap between the lab and real life. And in this final part, I'm excited to share some specific examples of how her findings can be applied in those areas you mentioned.
Okay, so let's start with education. You know, the traditional model of classrooms with rows of desks and lectures droning on, it doesn't exactly scream teenage brain friendly to me.
You're absolutely right. Luna's research has actually been quite influential in the movement towards more personalized learning environments. She argues that those traditional, rigid classroom structures often fail to engage the unique needs of the adolescent brain.
Because they don't allow for that exploration and experimentation that we were talking about earlier.
Precisely.
Right.
And remember how teens' cognitive control can be amplified when there's a reward involved? Well, Luna's work suggests that incorporating more hands-on learning, problem-solving activities, and opportunities for real-world application can make learning way more motivating and engaging for teens.
So instead of just lecturing at them about abstract concepts, we need to give them a chance to actually do something with the information, to apply it in a meaningful way, and actually see the results of their efforts.
Exactly. Think about project-based learning, where students work collaboratively to solve real-world problems. Or imagine classrooms designed around real-world simulations and challenges, where failure is seen not as a setback, but as a valuable part of the learning process.
That's a really powerful idea, especially because it taps into those reward systems we talked about earlier. Achieving a goal, contributing to a team, solving a real problem. Those are all experiences that can trigger those positive reward pathways in the brain and make learning more intrinsically motivating for teens.
Absolutely. And by providing those opportunities for trial and error, for making mistakes and learning from them, we can help teens build resilience and develop those all-important executive function skills.
Okay, so we've talked about education. What about parenting? I have a feeling a lot of our listeners are eager to hear how Luna's research can help them navigate the often challenging world of raising teenagers.
Oh, parenting a teenager can sometimes feel like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. But understanding the teen brain can give us a new perspective and some incredibly useful tools.
One of the key takeaways from Luna's work is the importance of patience and understanding. Remember, the teen brain is not flawed. It's simply wired differently than the adult brain. It's still developing, still figuring things out.
Exactly. And that means that instead of getting frustrated by those seemingly irrational outbursts or impulsive decisions, we can try to see them as a natural part of the developmental process and respond in a way that supports growth rather than just shuts down communication.
I can imagine that's easier said than done in the heat of the moment.
Of course. It's not about condoning bad behavior, but rather about choosing our battles and responding in a way that teaches rather than punishes.
So instead of yelling or lecturing, which often just makes things worse, we should focus on open dialogue, active listening, and really trying to understand what's going on beneath the surface.
Precisely. And Luna's research emphasizes the importance of creating a space where teens feel safe to express their thoughts and feelings, even those that might seem illogical or frustrating to us.
And don't forget about those reward systems. Positive reinforcement can be a really powerful tool in parenting teens.
Absolutely. Instead of just focusing on what they're doing wrong, try to catch them doing something good and acknowledge their efforts. Celebrate those small victories and help them build confidence in their abilities.
It's like we need to be their cheerleaders, not just their critics.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of simply spending quality time together. Those shared experiences, whether it's watching a movie, going for a walk, or just having dinner together, can strengthen those parent-child bonds and create a foundation of trust and support that can help teens through tough times.
Now, I want to make sure we touch on mental health before we wrap up. We know that adolescence is a period of increased vulnerability to mental health challenges, and Luna's work offers some hope for developing more effective interventions.
One of the most encouraging aspects of her research is this emphasis on the incredible plasticity of the teen brain, its ability to change and adapt even in the face of adversity. So even if a teenager is struggling with a mental health issue, there's still so much potential for positive change.
So it's not a life sentence. It's a starting point.
Exactly. And by understanding how experiences shape neural pathways, we can develop interventions that target those specific circuits and promote healthy brain development.
Can you give me an example of what that might look like?
So cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is a great example. It's been shown to be really effective for a range of mental health issues in adolescence. And it's based on this idea that we can actually retrain our brains to think and behave differently.
So by learning to identify and change those negative thought patterns and behaviors, teens can actually rewire their brains for the better. That's incredibly powerful.
It really is. And because the teen brain is so adaptable, early intervention can make a huge difference in preventing those negative patterns from becoming entrenched.
It's like we have this incredible opportunity during adolescence to really set the stage for lifelong mental well-being.
Exactly. It's about intervening early, providing support, and creating environments that foster resilience and well-being. And Luna's research is giving us the tools to do just that.
This has been such an illuminating deep dive. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface, but I'm already walking away with a completely new perspective on the teenage brain.
Me too. And I hope our listeners are feeling the same way. Instead of seeing adolescence as this problem to be solved, let's start appreciating it as this amazing period of growth and transformation, full of both challenges and incredible potential.
And remember, the journey of brain development doesn't end in adolescence. We're all constantly learning, growing, and evolving throughout our lives.
So let's embrace the journey. Stay curious and keep those brains buzzing.
Until next time.